Pleased to share with you today something different in the NSC feed for this week's episode. It's a bit more explicitly theological and a bit more insider baseball so far as some of the sorts of work I've done in the Theological Guild. This is a conversation I had with Preston Sprinkle. Preston is a New York Times bestselling author and biblical scholar. He also hosts a long-running podcast called Theology in the Raw. The conversation you'll hear was taped for Theology in the Raw, which seeks to have honest and forthright conversations, often where theology meets contemporary culture. Pretty sure this was my second time on Preston's podcast. You'll hear us explore political theology, the rise of Christian nationalism, and how Christian faith has been shaped, often distorted, by allegiance to power, nation, and ideology. Also hear us talk about the ways in which contemporary developments often lead us to forget elements of our past. That then specifically led us into a conversation around pacifism and the Christian just war tradition. Preston and I also spent some time reflecting on technology, social media, why asking what kind of people we are becoming may be more important than debating tools or tactics. It was a fun conversation. Since it gives you a slightly different perspective on my own work, we thought it might be a good one to drop into the feed for you. Before we dive in, be sure to follow Theology in the Raw on your favorite podcast app. Here's my conversation with Preston Sprinkle. Hey friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I've been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. You have originally this kind of notion that the internet and social media is going to democratize things and bring about profound social goods. Once the social media platforms decided to go towards an ad revenue model, they knew that we have to have eyeballs on the platform. And then they learned that what keeps you most engaged is anger. That's one thing that I want to always try to keep in mind and tell people is that, remember, it's a business model.
Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Theology in the Raw. My guest today is Dr. Lee Camp, who is the creator and host of No Small Endeavor, which is an acclaimed podcast series exploring what it means to live a good life. He is an award-winning teacher, professor of theology and ethics at Lipscomb University in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where this episode was shot. This is shot in person in Franklin, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. Lee is the author of several books, including one of my absolute favorites on political theology called Scandalous Witness. And that's where we go. We talk about lots of things related to political theology and our cultural moment. So please welcome back to the show, the one and only Dr. Lee Camp. Well, Lee Camp, thanks for coming back on Theology in the Raw. I'm sure it'll come up in this conversation, and it did in the last conversation, but I just want to give another shout out to your book. Scandalous Witness was absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
I remember reading it. I was on sabbatical during COVID. I think it had just come out. That was fall of 2020. I think it came out that spring, maybe.
It came out like a week before the shutdown started for COVID. So horrible timing.
Yeah. It's an outstanding book. And what was the one that I read 15 years before that?
First one was Mere Discipleship.
Mere Discipleship. Yeah.
And then I did one called Who is My Enemy? Questions American Christians Must Face About Islam and Themselves.
Oh.
And then Scandalous Witness.
Wait, so what kind of interest do you have in Islam? Do you have a background in that, or?
Well, that makes for an interesting story.
We were just talking about what we're going to talk about.
Right, yeah.
You did not mention Islam, but hey, you mentioned your book. So
first, thanks for having me back. It's great to see you, and
you too.
First time to meet in person. So so great to be with you. Probably. I don't know what year it was. It was in the probably 2006 or 7, somewhere in there. I was invited to do this lecture on Christianity, and it was in a interfaith gathering. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of did what I do, which is, an Anabaptist influenced kind of reading of the Christian tradition. And I asked questions like, why should Muslims trust us when we have this sort of history of imperialistic imposition of our will?
Yeah.
And there was a reporter there. It was a really interesting gathering, a diverse gathering of people from different religious traditions and press at the same time. And so the reporter from the Tennessean was there, and she called me afterwards and she asked some follow-up questions. And so I could tell that she was hearing some of my rhetorical questions as assertions rather than rhetorical questions. So I tried to kind of let her know what I was trying to say. And so we talked about a half an hour. So the next morning I got up and I thought, I should go check the newspaper, still print newspapers back then, before I go to school. And I went out at the end of my driveway, and the front page of the Tennessean top fold says something like, "Theologian says Christians must let go beliefs to get along with Muslims." And I uttered an expletive, and I said, "I hope that's not talking about me." And it said, "Professor Lee Camp said," and then it just, took off. And so, but to make a very long story short, by the end of that day, I had heard from Fox News in New York City, talk radio in Detroit, the local rap station in Nashville had a call-in survey and found me stupid by a wide margin. And I had been called every name in the book. I got doxxed by some right-wing blog.
Oh, my God.
And it was crazy.
How long ago was this?
This was some 2006 or 7, something like that.
A while ago.
Yeah. And so, but out of that experience, I thought, I don't know that much about Islam.
Mm-hmm.
And so why don't I try to go learn more? And so I did. I went to the Middle East for a month, got a study grant to go over there, met some wonderful...
Where'd you go?
I went to mainly Israel, Palestine for 3 weeks, and then Istanbul for a week.
Okay.
And I met a lot of Muslim theologians and philosophers and political scientists and stuff like that. And it was just so rich and wonderful.
What was that like?
Oh, it was overwhelmingly wonderful, And I think the way I would summarize it is that I loved that experience because I learned so much more about who I was and my own faith by being in conversation with people of another tradition.
Mm.
Because it was like I could begin to see some of the beauty of my own tradition that you don't necessarily see if you don't see it vis-a-vis something else. Mm-hmm. I also saw some of the beauty of the Islamic tradition, right? And so I got to, one of my favorite memories is being invited to dinner one night at the home of one of the leading Muslim theologians in Jerusalem. He's now at the head theologian at Al-Aqsa Mosque, in Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And this beautiful wonder. So here we were in his home, looking right across the valley there at the Dome of the Rock across the valley, and learning about what it's like to be a Palestinian and what it's like to be a Palestinian Muslim and the kinds of struggles and difficulties that are entailed in who he is. And we've stayed in touch through the years and communicate every now and then. But, a lot of beautiful, wonderful relationships. And I just learned a lot about myself and a lot about both the horrors of the Christian tradition and the beauty of the Christian tradition.
Wow. So that book, it's like a documenting your kind of personal journey. And
it talks about a lot of that story. And it also kind of lays out some of the major traditions in both Christianity and Islam on war and peace kind of stuff.
Okay.
But basically what I'm doing with regard to the Christian tradition is I'm kind of laying out, a lot of stuff that you're very familiar with and have thought about a lot of the kind of tradition of nonviolence, the rise of the just war tradition, the way the just war tradition gets co-opted into things like the Crusades and so forth. Right. And how we typically haven't owned our own kind of violence and our own bloody hands in the Christian tradition with regard to the way we've related to our neighbors. And so I kind of try to call us to account, rather than just simply pointing our fingers to give an account. And one thing that I try to do, this is kind of the way I try to approach a lot of my work, is that I try to ask, what's right and or unhelpful about stereotypical right-leaning ways of thinking about this.
Right.
What's right and or unhelpful about stereotypical left-leaning ways of thinking about this. And so I just kind of play all that kind of stuff out in the book.
You do that in Scandalous Witness too, really well.
Yeah.
I love that you don't, some books that are trying to de-partisanize the faith, they end up kind of picking really on one side over and over and over. And I think you navigated that tension really well in Scandalous Witness. Like you didn't get, except for some people that they challenge the right over and over and over, and you almost wonder, like, do you think the hope of the best response is let's embrace the left, or to critique the right from the perspective of the left rather than from a kingdom of God perspective? And I love that you were very clear that you're situated smack dab in the kingdom of God and viewing politics as almost like a singular entity, although there's different manifestations of that through that lens.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that, I mean, one of the things that I often find myself saying in some of these contexts, some of these conversations is I often remind people that Christian nationalism, you were much more likely to find that on the left in mainstream Protestantism early part of the 20th century than you were among the conservatives. And, I mean, Woodrow Wilson's the classic example of that, as this kind of mainstream Christian, and he was just this outrageous Christian nationalist.
I've never heard his name mentioned in that context. I know nothing about Woodrow other than I think he was a president. But.
he was a president. He was a racist, and outspoken racist, and he also used the language of we're going to get into the so-called Great War as the war to end all wars, and so he uses this sort of he's very explicit Christian, but he's thinking about bringing about the prophetic ends of a peaceable world precisely through war.
Wow.
And then after the war, he goes out on this speaking tour and he does these crazy speeches where he says things like, "At last, the world sees America as the savior of the world."
Oh my gosh! Oh.
Yeah, and you couldn't get any more blatantly, nationalist. And so I think that it's important to realize that this is not just a right-wing thing historically,
because he's Democrat.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think it's important to see that kind of stuff can rise up in all sorts of manifestations, ugly manifestations.
Yeah. I'm curious. So we're here live in Nashville. The South, we're in right now, I believe Williamson County is very conservative Republican. Like, I don't know what kind of percentages of Williamson County vote Republican. It's probably upwards
very high,
70% or something. I'm just making that up.
Yeah, I don't remember the numbers, but it's very high.
I know Nashville, like the city of Nashville's different. And that's going to be way more diverse, maybe even more left-leaning.
I think Nashville and Memphis are kind of like the blue dots in the state.
Yeah. Typical bigger cities. Other than Boise, Idaho. Idaho is extremely right-wing, but Boise's pretty mixed. In fact, it might even lean blue depending on the season. But what's it? But you're a Christian, teaching at a Christian school, and you have a political theology. For those who don't know Lee Camp's political theology, just Google Preston Sprinkle, or if you want to know my political theology, just Google Lee Camp. We very like-minded, very, like you said, Anabaptist influenced political theology. What's it like viewing politics through that lens in the South, and as a Christian in the South, where I would imagine that's not a very popular position?
Yeah, it ranges between often painful and bizarre.
Let's start with why don't we just start in order? Let's start with painful.
Well, I think that there's this sort of presumption that for a lot of people that if you're Christian, then you're right. You're committed to American right-wing politics.
Okay.
And for me, that's painful in that it trounces on so much about the gospel. And there's this sort of set of assumptions. And if you push back at those too much, then you kind of get dismissed, marginalized, slapped around, or whatever. So yeah.
Now, in your institution, it wouldn't be like that, right? Or
that's a complicated question these days.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about my institution, I mean, most of the people affiliated with my institution, Lipscomb University, is where I've taught for I taught for 25 years. I actually stopped teaching about a year ago. I'm still on contract over there, but still around. But David Lipscomb. I don't know if you know much about David Lipscomb.
It's a little bit. I think last time I interviewed you, I looked into Lipscomb University. I didn't realize there's like kind of strong Anabaptist.
Yeah. So David Lipscomb was this kind of committed pacifist, radical Southern agrarian, and so. What's so interesting about Lipscomb and actually 19th century Stone Campbell tradition is that most of the leaders were pacifists.
Wow.
And so, if you go to Lipscomb University these days, and you're going to see a dorm called Fanning, and he was a committed pacifist who, at least one biography, I've not gotten this confirmed with another biographical source, but in at least one biography of Fanning, it's told that because he refused to encourage his students to go fight in the Confederacy, they came to his house, took all of his belongings out of his house, and burned them in his front yard.
Wow.
If you go over and see, the dorm Elam, well, that's another pacifist. If you go over there to McQuitty Gym, that's another pacifist.
Oh, wow.
If you go over to Harding Hall, that's another pacifist. And so I think most people these days wouldn't have the foggiest idea that you had this sort of tradition. But it wasn't just the pacifism. I mean, Lipscomb was an ardent critic of the robber barons. He was an ardent critic of racism. He was an ardent critic of all forms of militarism and nationalism. And so he had this sort of devoted kind of American Anabaptist kind of flavor to his Christianity. And by the time you get to World War I, that starts getting washed out of the tradition.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And
because of war, and not just chronologically. But
well, World War I was a time of a lot of harsh retaliation toward anybody that critiqued the government with regard to the war. And so there was a so-called Anti-Sedition Act that was used to prosecute people who criticized the war. So the leading journal in Nashville at the time for the Stone Campbell tradition that David Lipscomb actually edited was called The Gospel Advocate. And they were publishing conscientious objector forms in the pages of the journal. And so the federal government says you can either stop publishing those conscientious objector forms or we're going to come shut you down.
Wow.
And so they stopped publishing it. There was a college that I'm drawing a blank on the name of the college out in Oklahoma. And they were similarly, encouraging conscientious objection. The federal government came in, actually shut the school down and replaced the board of the school with pro-war people and reopened the school. And so you have all this kind of craziness happening by the federal government in World War I. And so that begins to have a ripple effect upon the tradition that I grew up in. And then again, like I say, by the time you get to today, you could walk on campus and ask probably most of the faculty and staff if they know that. And most of them are going to tell you no.
Oh, wow.
They don't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the Stone Campbell movement, like today, exists in kind of three parts, right? You have the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and Church of Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think Church of Christ would be the most conservative. Or is that Christian Church?
Well,
the Disciples is more can be more liberal, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Typically. Well, it's the branches split. As I remember the church history here, and I hadn't looked at this in a while, but the most American denominations split prior to the Civil War around the issue of slavery.
Okay.
And then, but the Stone Campbell tradition did not split before the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And you had people like Lipscomb who were very insistent upon, we should not go fight for the Confederacy because we're going to make widows of our Northern sisters in Christ. And he actually wrote a letter to the head of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, and said, we will not fight for you because we're disciples of Christ. Mm-hmm. Then a year later, 1862, the federal forces took over Nashville, and he writes the same letter. He and a bunch of ministers signed this letter to General Grant, saying, we will not fight for you, just like we didn't fight for the Confederates because we are followers of Christ. Mm-hmm. And so you have people like Lipscomb and those people around him who are insistent upon not letting that kind of sectarianism trump their identity in Christ. So the movement doesn't split prior to the war. but they do begin to have these tensions after the war. And so you kind of have increasingly a tension between North and South. And a lot of that relates to, the poverty in the South following the war. The South looks down, feels like they're being looked down upon by the Northern disciples. And the Northern disciples, meanwhile, are building big church buildings. And even, one of the big deals in Churches of Christ is non-instrumental music, right? So sociological descriptions of this, which is really interesting. The sociological descriptions of it is that in the South, they're having a hard time feeding their kids. And the churches in the North are building big church buildings and putting in expensive organs.
Oh, wow.
And so they're like, this animosity, and it begins to be focused upon something like music. And but then they find ways to make arguments about it that become, so-called biblical. But that tension grows and grows until 1906. David Lipscomb is actually contacted by the U.S. Religious Census, and he says, we're two different movements. So they split in 1906. And then within the disciples, there's another split between the liberals and the conservatives in the 1960s, which is the disciples and the Christian church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So depending upon which Christian church and depending on which Church of Christ that you're comparing, they could be more or less conservative / liberal.
So we've got a pretty big population of Christian church from that movement in Idaho, especially Boise, Idaho, where I'm at. Some of the bigger churches are Christian church. The one Bible college is a Christian church Bible college, and they and I don't think I've ever even attended one, but I know people who are involved. I know lots of people who go there, and so I know a bit about that current form of the tradition. And it just seems like they seem like your, I guess, typical kind of conservative, maybe more right wing evangelical. It's just interesting that if you go all the way back to the roots, that would not have resonated with the early
That's right.
founders of the movement.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's happened because, one of the ironies of that whole movement is that it began as a unity movement, and it began as a let's don't be exclusivist, thinking we're just the only Christians, but instead be Christians only, and all that kind of well-intentioned rhetoric. But it just didn't work very well, and so then you end up with 3 new denominations. And then by the time you get to the middle of the 20th century with Churches of Christ, you have this exclusivism where we're the only Christians. And so you go from a unity movement to being sectarians. But then as most of the Churches of Christ and Christian churches have been kind of embarrassed about that sectarianism, rather than recovering the interesting 19th century kind of Anabaptist flavor version, they're becoming evangelicals.
Hello, friends. Lee Seacamp here. Do you ever wish you had more folks to discuss the conversations we offer on No Small Endeavor? Something like a podcast listening club where you could engage big ideas about what it means to live life well and then discuss it with friends and companions? If so, you have stumbled upon the announcement you have been waiting for. We're pleased to announce the start of Endeavor Together, our new initiative that equips and nurtures close-knit communities to talk about the things you actually want to talk about. Each small group conversation series is built upon our podcast content and provides you with super easy to use content with questions, videos, links, and guidance so that you or any good and willing soul can host small group conversations exploring what it means to live a good life. Maybe you'll meet in homes around a table, maybe in a coffee shop or local park, maybe at work during lunch hour, maybe in a church Sunday school class. What we are providing is the scaffolding for good conversation. The rest is up to you. And here's the best part. Thanks to generous support from the Lilly Endowment, it's free. The first 2 series have been released. The first, Let's Disagree Better, and the second, Vulnerability. Get started today. Visit nosmallendeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com and click on Endeavor Together. Enjoy.
So going back to my original question, like being a more Anabaptist thinker, theologian, living in the South, where it's where the Christian community is predominantly more right wing. Have you seen that get more widespread, galvanized, aggressive? From like let's just go back to like when he wrote Scandalous Witness. Like, have you seen it? Have you seen more right-wing Christianity in your neck of the woods here get more extreme, more powerful, more vocal, or has it always been like that?
It is, from my experience, it is undoubtedly getting more extreme, more vocal, and carrying more weight.
Okay. Do you have an assessment on why that is? Is it because there's people in political power that share those views, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much at stake, right? I mean, in the sense that, I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to know what to say here, because like we're in the middle of a moment in which a right-wing influencer has been telling a lot of lies that's causing immense distress in our community, including just this week an arrest because of a threat to blow up the school.
Really?
And it's just bizarre, and doing it in the name of conserving Christian tradition. As far as the person who's stirring all this stuff up,
threat to blow up.
Well, the person who made a threat to blow up the school, I don't know anything about that person.
Okay.
But they were reacting to what this influencer was putting out there, as best we can tell.
Wow.
Who is, telling a lot of untruths about things, but she's doing it from this very right-wing Christian nationalist kind of stuff.
Is she well known? Because there's been, you don't need to say who it is if you don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to say who it is, but
because there was another school where somebody else that sounds like a similar situation.
Yeah,
nothing.
I mean, she's been on the news a lot, right-wing news outlets a lot doing this, and so, and it's just, and it's just so, and so, like even in her critiques, she's saying this school has left its roots, and it's not the, the Church of Christ that it used to be, and I'm like, you don't have the foggiest idea what in the world you're talking about, right? If you understood what David Lipscomb was about, all you could do was think that he's some far out radical leftist, right? And so it's just exasperating because people paint in these broad strokes and don't really want to understand and don't want to have nuance, but they just have this kind of partisan. They appear to have just this partisan political agenda, and then go after other people and really do a lot of damage and destruction. And then the institutions are often left reeling with their own kind of fear, and then begin to react in fear towards various kinds of things. And so it's just it's a bizarre time. It's a bizarre time in higher education in the country, and it's a bizarre time in Christian higher education in the country, and it's a bizarre time in Christian higher education in the Bible Belt. It's just really all sorts of layers of complexity.
Because people like that can affect, if they influence people to change their perception about the school, even if it's not based on truth, that can affect numbers. It can affect donors. It can have ripple effects.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it has direct financial implications, right?
As much as I would like to say as an idealist, like, oh, who cares? When you're the president, when you're managing budgets and payroll, like, kind of, you're staring at that every day, and that is something to consider.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen with organizations over the last few years, and even, I mean, my name's been, I've been subject to that. For me, I'm fortunate enough that I'm not in a situation where it ever, if anything, it like almost increases my platform or whatever you want to call it. So it doesn't affect me financially, but I know some adjacent ministries people don't have the luxury of being so kind of untethered from those institutional problems, and so they are definitely affected by those kind of accusations.
How have you found it? How have you found? What have you found to be crucial in navigating that kind of critique and criticisms?
Ignore it. I don't. I think we're living in two different worlds. One is like an online social media influencer, Twitter world. And then there's my physical neighbors, people at the downtown coffee shop, and all day I'll rub shoulders with Trump voters, non-Trump voters, whatever, and they're all pretty much decent human people, that don't have a Twitter account, and they're just trying to make a living, and they're not that invested in the politics. They'll show up at the ballot box, whatever. They watch the news. So some definitely are, would be more discipled by their news channel and stuff. But I mean, my neighbors are, my one neighbor is his well for his pump just will not get going. And he's had, back surgery, and just like, I don't even know who he voted for. He's just like a neighbor that needs help, which I haven't helped him. I drive by and I'm on my, I probably shouldn't start that story. It sounded like it was going to get to a good Christian point, but poor old neighbor Mike is out there working on his well, but I feel bad for him. I should probably stop and help the Levite on the side.
Let us know about that.
Yeah. I'll go to work. But I don't know. Like, yeah, when I almost all of my accusations of being a heretic, of being demonized, or all this stuff, it's like it comes from some social media account that I don't know if it's a bot, if it's a real person. I don't know if their wife just had an affair on them, or I don't know what's going on with this person. Some are more like widely influential, but even then, it's like the accusations are so outrageous. I would say slanderous and sometimes evil and just straight out lies that I just pray that God would deal with that. But I found that responding on that kind of platform, I have done it in the past, and I 100% always regret it. It's just not worth it. And because of the nature of my ministry, it really does not affect me. My wife's not on social media. She doesn't see it. My kids don't see it. The real friends I have in my life, either they get more upset than I do, or they don't see, so it's like, I don't just ignore it. And 24 hours later, they're off, yelling at somebody else. And, and they'll come back. And it's just like, as long as I don't go looking for that stuff, it doesn't affect me. So
that's good.
Yeah. But it seems to be an increasing problem. People with some social power, and strong opinions are getting away with slander.
Yeah.
In the name of Jesus.
Right. Yes.
I don't know if it's increased. I want to believe, well, this has always been around, but is it increasing? Is it becoming more of an issue? Is this like, are we headed down really dark spaces of the church where there's just going to be these influencers just slandering one another, and it's just producing greater toxicity in the church and people losing money and institutions suffering from it? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, clearly, you had, we've got Sharon McMahon coming to Nashville to do a show with us, and I was reading her book, and she talks about how vicious fights were in the halls of Congress in the 19th century, and you had at least one episode of somebody shooting at somebody. Really? You had another episode where a famous beating where a guy took a cane and beat another senator, almost, very, very seriously with a cane in the Senate House. And so there definitely have been very horrifically violent times.
We did go through a civil war that was the most violent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And Christians on both sides.
Right, yeah. And definitely have been plenty of seasons of very grave violence and hostility. But it certainly gets obviously leveraged by the tools, social tools, if we want to call them tools, that we have at hand.
Yeah. It does seem to be getting with the algorithms that are feeding people's angst and anger. And the more you click on things that make you angry, the more you get fed, the more you get polarized, the more you hunker down in your silos, the more you see people you disagree with as the enemy. It seems like that's getting worse. And I don't know what the end result's going to be. People just unplugging. I just had a guy on, and he says, like, I am rarely online on purpose. Like, I just have to remove myself from that world for my spiritual health, really. That I wish everybody had that perspective. That's pretty rare. As long as people are living online, I just see that heading down to really dark places. I don't want to be a pessimist.
We recently had Garrett Graff on No Small Endeavor, our podcast, and he has done a lot of research on the history of the internet, and he was talking about how, you have originally this kind of notion that the internet and social media is going to democratize things and bring about profound social goods.
Yeah.
And there are early indicators that indeed is what's happening with, the Arab Spring and so forth. But then at the same time, you find these episodes in which it like literally contributes to genocide, and they're using these social media platforms, and the lies that are propagated, and horrific case that we talked about. But he talks about how, once the social media platforms decided to go towards an ad revenue model, they knew that with that, we have to have eyeballs on the platform. And then they learned that what keeps you most engaged is anger. And so, he claims that Facebook realized that in their algorithm, that if you responded with an angry face to a post, that was worth 5 times more to the algorithm than if you replied with a like.
Are you serious?
And so what you have is just this propagation of anger, because there's a financial model. So that's one thing that I want to always try to keep in mind and tell people is that, remember, it's a business model.
Yes.
And the business model is trying to get you ticked, right? And Garrett pointed me to this interview. I can't remember the man's name, but he was a former way high up Facebook executive in doing a lecture at Stanford Business School. And, and he says, look, this is what we're trying to do. And he says, he uses some expletives, and he says, but I don't let my kids use the, effing stuff.
I heard about this.
Yeah. And he said, and I don't use the
but he's producing it.
But he had left at that point.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And so it's just this sort of poison that's poured out in our culture, and that people are profiting off of.
I mean, it's got to lead somewhere. That's going to cause a reboot to say, okay, we need to backtrack and say, let's develop different patterns here or something. Yeah. I would hope. I mean, geez, otherwise it leads to another civil war. Yeah. Have you done much thinking on AI?
I have been thinking a good bit about that over the last year. I actually did my undergraduate degree was in computer science.
I remember you had a tech
and so I've cared about interest in technology for throughout my life, and about a year ago I decided I want to try to at least start learning a lot about AI, and so I did a business course through Said Business School at Oxford last year on AI, just to start running and thinking about all that kind of stuff. And so we've started interviewing a lot of people in No Small Endeavor about technology and AI.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking a lot about it.
What are the questions you're asking? What should we be asking? What do we know? What don't we know? What scares you? What excites you?
I mean, I'm still kind of in this place of where I'm just trying to learn a lot. I mean, I use it, and
like ChatGPT or
I usually ChatGPT, yeah. But I'm just in this place of trying to learn a lot and pay attention a lot and see what seems to be going on, and so I'm still in this learning mode.
Yeah,
but have you read Jacques Ellul much?
No, I know. Oddly enough, no.
Yeah,
but familiar with. Yeah.
I mean, his book Technological Society is magnificent, and I've always been so surprised about how few people have read him, when it seems like everybody should have read him. And no shame intended there.
For the record, I've read hardly. This is gonna be embarrassing. I shouldn't even say it. I've read hardly any C.S. Lewis. Maybe cumulatively 3/4 of a book, piecemealed with a few. I mean, that's. But I read all the time for a living. That's all I do is read. So it's not like I'm not reading.
I'd rather you have go read Jacques Ellul.
Really? Okay. That's gonna cause some debate there. All right.
But in Technological Society, he says of this idea of what he calls technique. And what he means by technique is the means and ensemble of means without regard to ends. And it's means that asks the question, what's the most efficient way to do whatever?
without regard to ends.
Yes.
That doesn't sound threatening, but as he plays it out, it's like devastating. And he sees it as this sort of acid that eats away at every form of community, every religious tradition, even, he makes the case it's even going to undercut, so he's writing in the height of the Cold War. And he says, everybody thinks that the big question is between the capitalists and the socialists, capitalists and the communists. And he says, but technique's going to eat away even at all of that.
Wow.
And so it's fascinating to read him and then start watching the way in which so much is unfolding. And he, I think, gives us a great question to ask, namely, he uses this weird, he's writing in French, so I don't know what it is in French, but in English translation, he uses this word characterology. Yeah, and so the idea is rather than thinking of technique or technology as a tool, you ask the question, what kind of character is being developed in us by the technology and the technique that we employ?
Interesting.
And so that's always the question that I'm always asking, of what kind of person am I becoming by the use of this thing?
Yes.
And that's a lot more interesting question than just thinking of our phone as a tool or AI as a tool. It's not merely instrumental, but it actually shapes us and changes us by our engagement with it.
Yeah, I don't have any kind of tech background, but I've been listening to some conversations and just trying to follow it a little bit. And depending on who you listen to, it can be pretty frightening how the development of it is outpacing like ethical reflection or control on its use. I listened to I don't know if you've listened to Tucker Carlson interviewed Sam Altman and pushed him really hard on the ethics of like, can you Sam Altman and his team, they're in control of like what answers are allowed to be given. Like someone says, how do I make a bioweapon? Like, do you give that information? What if you're a fiction writer and just want to build in like, a scene? What about how can I commit suicide? Are you going to feed people that? What about when people ask other moral questions and like what kind of answers are given and who's determining what answers are given? I never even thought about that. He just kept pushing. And it turned out like, gosh, like Sam Altman chooses, he said, we got a team of like 100 or I forget what it was, like ethicists, and Tucker, rightly so, is like, who are they? Like, these are potentially the most influential moral people in, the most influential, moral influencers in potentially human society. And like, I want to know what's their morality, because if someone thinks abortion is immoral, like, do they think that? Do they think suicide is okay? How about euthanasia? Like, is that like, and I was just like sitting there like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought of any of these questions, but like I was kind of going down the rabbit trail, like, oh gosh, like we are at the fountainhead of decisions being made that we don't really even know that could have massive effects on human civilization.
Yeah, it's a huge moment in human history.
I run a conference every year, Exiles in Babylon. Appreciate that. And we're doing a whole like 3-hour pre-conference on like how should Christians respond to AI. And I've got 3 Christians with like PhDs in AI, and I can't wait for that, because I'm like, man, I think the church, I feel like it's very segmented. Like there's certain people that are so into it and they think about it all the time, and then everybody else is like not even really thinking about it. I feel like it's kind of still is kind of a siloed interest. And I'm like, I think we need to maybe start mainstreaming these conversations more. Yeah.
Yeah, I very much agree.
Yeah. Are you working on, you said you have a paperback version of Scandalous Witness coming out? That's not anything new.
2026.
Okay.
Yeah.
More accessible. Are you working on any other writing projects right now?
I am. I'm doing a little bit of writing so in the No Small Endeavor world, we have our main podcast, No Small Endeavor, and then we've got another new podcast called The Subtext, which is co-hosted with Savannah Locke. And so the premise of that show is that
Our team teases me because I don't have a cell phone, and that
I heard that when we were trying to get a hold of you when you were coming here. Keep going. I'm going to come back to that though.
So they always tease me about not knowing what's going on in the world because I don't have a cell phone, and so they
Not just the smartphone. No, you don't have a flip phone, no cell phone.
correct. Yeah. I mean, we have a landline at our house, and I have a Google Voice number on my computer.
Okay.
So so I can communicate with people, but I just don't have a phone that I put in my pocket. Yeah. And so anyway, so they teased me about not knowing anything about pop culture. And so they said, what if we get somebody who's interested in pop culture, and then you guys talk about pop culture stuff, trends, and the kind of theology or moral philosophical implications of whatever trends are going on. So that's been super fun. So, working on that a good bit. And so, for example, we've done an episode on the Liver King and masculinity, or we did an episode on Taylor Swift's new album. And so it's fun. I'm learning a lot, and Savannah's a great co-host, and so that's a lot of fun working on that. And then I'm also doing some writing on our NSC Plus subscriber community, where I had several people suggest maybe that I do some autobiographical kind of stuff, which I've never written. And so I'm writing some of that stuff and putting that out as podcast episodes on NSA Plus. So,
okay, so let's go back to no cell phone. First of all, I when my producer Chris told me you don't have a cell phone, and I clarified so no smartphone. He's like no cell phone. I'm like, wow. I mean, a spike of admiration. And then 1,000 questions. How do you get from point A to point B? How did you even find this place? Do you print out Google Maps?
I have an iPad. I'm not a Luddite, because so I use technology a fair amount.
Oh, so you do have a GPS when you drive?
Yeah. So as long as I load up the map before I leave the house, I can follow on GPS.
I don't know if you had a big Rand McNally
I do love paper maps though. I love paper maps.
I do too. Yeah.
But I still either use Google Maps or whatever on my iPad.
On your iPad. How about when you traveled? Airplane apps. I mean, do you just get the paper ticket or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's becoming increasingly difficult. I mean, increasingly you can't park somewhere without a cell phone.
Yeah. That's another one. Yeah.
Exasperating. It really ticks me off.
You literally can't.
Yeah. I mean, something like last week I was going downtown Nashville.
Yeah.
And I had to talk this guy into letting me park for free at this garage because I don't have a phone, and
I'm sure he did not believe you when you said you don't have a phone. He's like, oh yeah, right.
But he was gracious, and he said, okay, just pull on in there, you'll be fine. I'll take care of you. But that's one of the interesting things about it is that I end up talking to people I'd never talked to.
Oh yeah.
And I remind myself that it's like a serenity tax.
Yeah.
That you have to pay the tax. Everybody's got to pay something for whatever decisions we make, and I have to pay my tax for some of that decision that I've made. But at least to this point, I don't know if I'll stay with that forever, but at least to this, I'm about 8 years in, I think, with that one.
8 years.
And
did you take me back to when you made that decision? And was it did you really think through it, or was it just kind of you just never really got one and just?
I had just gotten a new, what was at the time I think the iPhone 7, which was one of the first big screen ones.
Yeah.
And
so you have had a smartphone.
I have had a smartphone, yeah. And so I had it in my back pocket, sat down in the car, and cracked the screen. And so I tried 3 different times to get it fixed, and for whatever reason, it was just dragging out. So by the time I tried the 3rd time, it had been a month or more, and I thought, I wonder what it would be like just to try this. And so, it created a fair amount of stress with my people I work with.
I bet they hate
my
it.
wife. And
I want to talk to your wife after this.
And so, yeah, it definitely created some stress and anxiety, but it's worked,
Yeah.
And it's worked also because some of those I must say, because people around me also have cell phones, it makes it easier for me to have one, and because they also will indulge me in certain ways, and so it's a team.
So it's not like a it doesn't sound like it's a moral issue. How would you describe if someone says, "Why don't you have a cell phone?" What would be your elevator pitch answer?
I'm a less anxious person without it.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah.
So my own kind of trying to prioritize being at peace with myself and the world. And also very practically, I kept finding myself, even when I would set the phone down and put it in my console, I kept finding myself picking it up at red lights and texting.
Yes.
And I thought, I'm going to hurt somebody someday.
Yes.
And I don't want to hurt somebody by a stupid phone.
Yes. Texting and driving, I think, is more dangerous than drinking and driving.
Yeah.
I think I just read something where it's like
the implications are, the consequences are horrific.
Even just, what does that say about our humanity when you have 30 seconds at a red light and you want to get something done in that time? Like I find myself doing the same thing, or tempted to. Sometimes I resist, sometimes I don't. But it's just like, I don't like this world where this is normal. I remember the world when we didn't have that even temptation, or we're waiting in line at a store and everybody's on their phones, or in so many places waiting for your flight, and if you're not staring at your phone, you just kind of look around, people think you're a creeper or something like that. Like, what are you doing?
Well, and it breaks my heart really walking across campus and seeing. I've gotten to where a lot of times I'll just count. And, a lot of times 6 or 7 out of 10 are walking across campus looking at their phone.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, it's a campus full of amazing, wonderful human beings, and we're looking at the stupid phones.
Yeah.
And rather than talking to people. And, it's just, I think it's a sad kind of thing. And you just ask the characterology question, right?
Yeah.
What does it say about us that we can't sit for 30 seconds without trying to do something on our phone? And I just don't like the kind of person that I am when I have that available to me all the time. At the same time, when I'm at home, a lot of times I'll pick up my wife's phone and I'll start playing solitaire when I get bored.
You're like the pacifist that calls the cops to come do the dirty work. I don't believe in violence, so 911, hey, I got a bad guy here. Can you come?
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Go ahead.
I haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, but my friends tell me I have it because I chase shiny objects all the time. You're a pacifist, right? Or how would you describe your?
I seek to bear witness to the ways of Christ.
Okay, you got to expand on that.
Well, it's like Hauerwas always says about there's no good label, right?
Yeah. Do you believe there's ever a place for a Christian to use violence to accomplish justice or self-defense or to do good?
I can't conceive of how warring against enemies can ever bear witness to the way of Christ. I've had these. I had this friend that was a colleague for years. He's now somewhere else, but he used to always tease me and kind of make fun of me for pacifism. And he was a real big, strong guy. And, he'd start teasing me, and I'd say, "Scott, I'm going to take you outside and just kick your ass." And he said, "Oh, there's a pacifist. There he is. There he is." And he'd start teasing me, and I'd say, "Scott, you know full well there's a world of difference between a fist fight and dropping depleted uranium bombs on innocent civilians." And, it's like, I'm not really interested so much in the kind of moralistic, legalistic kind of stuff.
Okay.
But if we just look at the practices, they're horrible.
No.
And we so often do it with this sort of self-righteousness that really distresses me.
So you would say, it sounds like you're, I don't want to say ambiguous, but like your main focus is on militaristic, nationalistic violence, or the celebration of it, wars on a larger level, more than violence in certain situations, say as a last resort on an individual level, these kind of like, killer at the door type arguments, which usually are just, I don't know, they're not, the way they're framed aren't realistic, the way they're framed, and I don't know.
I mean, I still think that those are legit areas of moral discernment, right? Because
sure.
But the question becomes, can we think about even those kind of personal situations with an imagination that could try to bear witness to some alternate possibilities?
Yeah.
Can we find a way to respond to violence nonviolently?
Yeah.
And so, I think all of it's important. But I think that very often that kind of what would you do if kind of question is a way of ducking from what we can really see about what's going on in the world. And that our warring is just so typically this grotesque use of power.
Yeah. For me, it's like if the overwhelming majority of evangelical Christians said violence is bad, we shouldn't do it. The church should be known for being a nonviolent community. We should be known for loving our enemies. We don't support wars. If there is, if somebody breaks in my house and I try to do everything I can nonviolently and in the rush of the situation, violence is a last resort and I'm going to use violence. If that was the extent of how Christians conceive of violence, I'd be like, I could totally live with that.
Yeah.
I would still, let's keep talking about that. But if that was it, dude, I could live with it. If it was, we will only support wars that check off the 7 criteria of just war theory. We don't target civilians. We use proportionality. The motivation is not financial gain, which rules out most wars. So it's like, I will only support wars that are run through the grid of just war theory. I can get on board with that because that's going to cancel out almost every single war. But now we have Christians saying, dropping the nuclear bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima was a good thing. We celebrate that, and Israel has a right to defend itself. And it's unfortunate that tens of thousands of women and children have been killed. But what are you going to do? We have to get the bad guy, So I just think mainstream Christian approaches are so far removed from anything that could be seen as justifiable from a not even like a full nonviolent reading, but just like you said, kind of a basic
right
Christian.
I mean, for years, I when I would lecture I do these lectures on nonviolence, and I do a lecture on the just war tradition, and when I do my lecture on the just war tradition, I'd have them do a reading on it, and then I would work through the criteria. And after I've worked through the criteria, I would ask them, how many of you have ever heard a lecture or a sermon on the just war tradition? And out of years and years of teaching, I had maybe 2 people raise their hands out of thousands of students. And one of them was, I heard it from you at our church, and it's like, it's pretty fundamentally laughable when you say we believe in the just war tradition. But there's zero training.
Yeah.
Because if you take the just war tradition seriously, that's a very rigorous moral commitment that requires a lot of moral formation if you're going to keep it. But we don't train people in it.
Right.
And so it's kind of a joke. It's like, no, we don't believe that.
Well, and people
believe in doing whatever the state tells us to do.
Right. People will sling around the term just war theory, then they'll quote Romans 13, quote a couple of talking points, and then say, see, this is, we should be doing this,
Yeah.
The just war tradition is, I remember looking at that when I wrote my book on nonviolence, and I was like, geez, the whole motivation is war is not good.
Right.
It is not good at all. Like, we don't rush this, or even last resort. We have exhausted all diplomatic means that we know how, and it's like, that doesn't. That's I mean, Oliver Donovan, who's a just war theorist, and he even said history knows of no just wars. So it's and I think his point there, I can hardly understand Oliver Donovan, but I think it was he's not saying therefore just war theory is illegitimate. It's like it is kind of a untouchable standard that we should strive toward, not a criteria that every box must be perfectly checked off in order to call a war just, is my understanding of that quote. Well, Lee, I've taken you an hour, and I appreciate this. Went by so fast. I appreciate you taking the time to come down.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
I came farther than you did to meet here.
Indeed,
you came 20 minutes. I came on a 7-hour flight. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate what you do, and
thank
great
you
to be with you today.
Yeah, you too. And your podcast, it's called Every Small Endeavor.
No Small Endeavor.
No Small Endeavor.
Yeah. And that's been a lot of fun. We would love for some of your folks to check us out. So our tagline is exploring what it means to live a good life. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of take my virtue ethics kind of interests and ask questions about human flourishing. And then we talk to theologians, but we also talk to philosophers, scientists, social scientists, neuroscientists, artists, and about various conversations about human flourishing. And it's been super fun. And you may or may not know we're on public radio now. We're syndicated on public radio in 100 stations around the country. So that's been really fun. And have gotten to meet a lot of fascinating people and do that. So it's great.
Awesome. Thanks again, Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Preston.